Okay, so there is a rocket sitting on a launch pad in Boca Chica, Texas right now. It is called Starship, and it is the biggest rocket that any human being has ever built. It is taller than the Statue of Liberty in New York City. And the company that built it, SpaceX, built it faster than any rocket company has ever built anything. Not a little faster, way faster, like embarrassingly faster. And everybody wants to know how. NASA, which is the American space agency that put men on the moon with the Apollo rocket back in 1969, has been trying to build a new big rocket for over 10 years. It is called the Space Launch System, and it has cost American taxpayers over $23 billion. SpaceX built Starship for about $3 billion, and SpaceX did it in way less time. So what is going on over there in Boca Chica, Texas? What is SpaceX doing that nobody else is doing? That is what this video is about, and the first secret starts with a guy who got turned away at a door. The year is 2001, and Elon Musk flies to Moscow, Russia on an airplane to try to buy a rocket. He wants to go to Mars, and he needs a rocket to get there. He has money from selling a company called PayPal, which is the thing you use to send money to people online. He goes to a Russian rocket company and sits down and tries to buy one of their rockets. And they say no. They actually spit on the floor in front of him. That is a true story. Elon Musk flies all the way back home on that airplane, and he is sitting there thinking, and he gets out a piece of paper, and he starts writing down the cost of rocket parts, metal, fuel, engines, and he figures out that the parts to build a rocket only cost about 3% of what rocket companies were charging people. 3%. That means if a rocket costs $100 to build, the parts only cost $3. The rest is markups and middlemen and slow old companies charging whatever they want because nobody else is doing it cheaper. And Elon Musk lands at the airport, and he tells his friend Jim Cantrell, who was sitting next to him on the plane, "I think we can build a rocket ourselves." And that is secret number one. SpaceX decided to build almost everything themselves instead of buying it from other companies. Most rocket companies back then bought their parts from hundreds of different suppliers all over the country. Lockheed Martin, which is one of the biggest defense companies in America and makes F-35 fighter jets, buys parts from thousands of outside companies. Northrop Grumman, which builds the B-2 stealth bomber, same thing. Boeing, which makes the 737 airplane and also the Space Launch System rocket for NASA, same thing. All those companies are waiting on other companies to send them parts, and when one of those other companies is slow, everything gets slow. SpaceX said no. We are going to make our own engines, our own fuel tanks, our own computers, our own everything. Today, SpaceX makes about 85% of everything that goes into a Falcon 9 rocket right inside their own buildings in Hawthorne, California. That big factory in Hawthorne is where SpaceX was born. It used to be a Boeing factory that made plane parts, and now it is full of SpaceX workers building rockets. If they need to change something on the engine, they just walk down the hall. They do not have to call a company in Ohio and wait 6 months. They just walk down the hall and change it. That is why SpaceX moves fast, because they own the whole thing start to finish. Now, the second secret is the one everybody has seen on the internet and could not believe the first time they saw it. It is December 21st, 2015, and a Falcon 9 rocket is flying back down from space. But it is not crashing like every rocket ever built before it. It is slowing itself down with fire coming out of its engines, and it is standing itself up straight, and it lands on 4 little legs at Cape Canaveral in Florida. And the room full of SpaceX engineers at the Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California, goes completely insane. They are jumping up and down and screaming and crying, because no one had ever done that before, ever. In the entire history of rockets, which goes back to the V-2 rocket that Nazi Germany built in World War II, every single rocket that went to space just fell into the ocean and sank to the bottom and was gone forever. That is like buying a new Boeing 747 airplane and after one flight throwing it in the trash. SpaceX said that is insane. We are going to land the rocket and use it again. And they figured out how to do it. Now a Falcon 9 rocket booster, which is the big bottom part that has all the engines, gets reused over and over and over. Booster number B-No-62 flew 23 times. The same piece of metal, 23 flights. And the average time between one landing and the next launch has gotten down to about 25 days. One booster called B-1080 did it in just 13 days. 13 days from landing to launching again. No other rocket company on Earth can do that. Rocket Lab, which is a company from New Zealand that is really good and has a rocket called Electron, they are working on reusability now. Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos' rocket company that makes a rocket called New Glenn, They are trying too, but nobody is even close to what SpaceX is doing right now with Falcon 9. This is why a Falcon 9 launch only costs about $67 million, and a New Glenn launch from Blue Origin costs about $500 million. Same destination, same space, 7 times more expensive, because Blue Origin throws the rocket away, SpaceX catches it and uses it again. Now, the third secret is the weird one because it sounds like something you would hear about a startup company in San Francisco, not a rocket company. SpaceX blows things up on purpose, not because they made a mistake, on purpose. There is a rocket test facility in McGregor, Texas, which is a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, and SpaceX goes there to test things until they break. Elon Musk has a phrase for when a rocket explodes. He calls it a rapid unscheduled disassembly. RUD, that is SpaceX humor. The rocket did not explode. It had a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. And the reason they do this is because breaking something on purpose in Texas is a million times better than having it break on a real mission. When something goes wrong in a SpaceX test, the engineers run toward the data. They download every single sensor reading from the broken rocket to find out exactly what failed and exactly why. And then they fix it and try again. NASA with the Space Shuttle, which flew from 1981 to 2011 and was the most complicated flying machine ever built, took months and months to review every single thing after a test. There were so many rules and committees and sign-off sheets that it slowed everything way down. SpaceX does not do that. SpaceX reviews the data, figures out what broke, and moves to the next test as fast as possible. This is how they built Starship. They built a whole fleet of giant rockets at that launch site in Boca Chica, Texas, which SpaceX calls Starbase, and they just kept flying them and blowing some of them up and learning. SN8, which stands for serial number 8, flew up to about 12 kilometers above Texas in December 2020, and then came back down and flipped sideways and crashed and made a big orange fireball. And the SpaceX people cheered because it worked almost perfectly, and they got so much information from it. Then SN9 crashed, then SN10 landed, and then exploded a few minutes later. Then SN11 flew into a cloud and also exploded, and every single time, SpaceX got better. Then in October 2024, something happened that blew the whole world's mind. Starship flew up, and the booster came back down, and the launch tower at Starbase reached out with 2 giant metal arms and caught it. Caught a rocket out of the sky with robot arms. Those arms are nicknamed Mechazilla after the giant robot from the Godzilla movies, and they actually caught a Falcon coming back from space. The whole internet lost its mind for about a week. NASA never even imagined doing anything like that. Nobody did, because SpaceX got to that point by blowing things up over and over in Boca Chica, Texas, until they figured it out. Now the fourth secret is about the people SpaceX hires and what happens to them when they get there. SpaceX headquarters is in Hawthorne, California, which is right next to Los Angeles International Airport, and if you look up when you are landing at LAX on a plane, you can actually see the SpaceX building. The people who work there work very long hours. We are talking about 60, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes. Elon Musk is famous for sleeping on a couch at the factory during hard times. He slept on a couch at the Tesla factory in Fremont, California, when they were having trouble building the Model 3 car. He does the same at SpaceX, and the people who stay at SpaceX tend to be the ones who are so excited about going to Mars that the long hours feel okay to them. But it is not just about working hard. It is about who gets to decide things. At Boeing or Lockheed Martin, if an engineer wants to change something on a rocket, they have to fill out papers and get sign-offs from managers and then more managers and then safety boards and review panels. That process can take months or years. At SpaceX, engineers are allowed to make decisions much faster. There are not as many layers of bosses between the person with the idea and the rocket on the pad. Gwynne Shotwell, who is the president of SpaceX and one of the most powerful women in the history of the space industry, has said in interviews that the key is keeping the people who know the most about a problem as close to the decision as possible. Instead of an engineer telling a manager who tells a director who tells a vice president who tells Gwynne, the engineer can often just fix it. That sounds simple, but it changes everything. Because every layer of management you remove is weeks or months of waiting that you also remove. And SpaceX is fanatical about removing those layers. Now, the fifth secret is one that makes old space companies extremely uncomfortable when they hear it. SpaceX uses regular parts when regular parts are good enough. NASA and the old aerospace companies have a thing called space-grade hardware. These are parts that are specially made just for space, tested in special ways, approved by special committees. They cost 10 times or 100 times what a normal part costs. A normal computer chip you can buy at Best Buy for maybe $20. A space-grade version of the same chip might cost $20,000, and sometimes that is worth it. When you are sending astronauts to the International Space Station, which has been orbiting Earth since the year 2000, you want the best parts you can get. But SpaceX looked at this and said, wait, for a lot of things, the regular cheaper part is actually good enough, and if it fails, we will just build another one and fly again. This is especially true for Starlink, which is SpaceX's internet service from space. Starlink is a network of satellites that SpaceX has been putting in orbit since 2019, and there are now over 7,000 Starlink satellites circling the Earth right now. Each one of those satellites was built cheaply and fast in a factory in Redmond, Washington, not with special space-grade parts that cost a fortune, with good enough parts that do the job. And if one breaks and falls out of orbit, SpaceX just launches another one. Starlink now has over 10 million customers in 160 countries. 10 million people getting internet from SpaceX satellites in places like rural Montana and in boats in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and in remote villages in Africa, because SpaceX was willing to use cheaper parts and move faster. Now, the sixth secret is the one that is hardest for other rocket companies to copy even if they want to. SpaceX is paying for everything itself. Most rocket companies in history needed the government to pay for almost everything. The Saturn V rocket that took Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon in 1969 was paid for entirely by NASA and by American taxpayers. It cost about $25 billion at the time. The space launch system that Boeing is building for NASA right now, that has also cost over $23 billion of taxpayer money. SpaceX does get some NASA money. They have NASA contracts worth billions of dollars to fly astronauts to the International Space Station on the Crew Dragon capsule. The first time Crew Dragon took astronauts to the space station was in May 2020 when Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley flew up there, and the whole world watched it on CNN and YouTube. That was the first time American astronauts had launched from American soil on an American rocket since the space shuttle retired in 2011. So yes, SpaceX takes government money, but they also make their own money. A lot of it. In 2024, SpaceX made about $13 billion in total. Starlink alone made $7.7 billion. That money goes straight back into building Starship and doing more tests and hiring more engineers. SpaceX does not have to wait for Congress to approve a budget. They do not have to wait for a government committee to decide if they can spend money on a new test. They just spend it. And that freedom to spend money fast on things that might not work is worth more than almost anything else when you are trying to move fast. Because the biggest thing that slows down any project is waiting for someone to approve the money. And SpaceX mostly does not have to wait. Now, the seventh secret is the one that ties everything together, and it starts with a question. Why would anyone want to go to Mars? It is cold there. The air is poisonous. There is no pizza. But Elon Musk, since he was a little kid growing up in Pretoria, South Africa, has been obsessed with making humans a multi-planet species. That means humans living on more than one planet, so that if something terrible happens to Earth, like a big asteroid like the one that hit the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico 66 million years ago and killed the dinosaurs, humans do not all die. Some of us are already on Mars, and every single thing SpaceX does connects to that one dream. The reusable rockets connect to it, because you cannot afford to go to Mars if every rocket gets thrown away. The cheap parts connect to it, because you need millions of flights to move a whole civilization to Mars. The fast testing connects to it, because you need to solve problems fast, because Mars is very far away. The Starlink money connects to it, because without Starlink's revenue there is not enough money to build Starship. It all connects to Mars. And because everyone at SpaceX knows what they are working toward, it gives them a reason to work the long hours and move fast and not give up when a rocket explodes in Boca Chica, Texas. NASA has a mission statement too, but it has changed many times over the decades since John Glenn became the first American to orbit Earth on Friendship 7 in February 1962. SpaceX has had one mission statement since the day Elon Musk started it in a building in El Segundo, California in 2002. Make humans a multi-planet species. Full stop. That's it. Never changed. Never will change. And when you have one clear goal that every single person in your company believes in, you move fast. Because you have to. Because Mars is not going to wait. Because there are only certain windows every 2 years when Earth and Mars are close enough to each other to make the trip. The next window is coming. and the one after that, and SpaceX is building Starship to be ready for them. Now let's zoom out for 1 second, because it is actually even more impressive when you see the numbers together. In 2024, SpaceX launched 134 Falcon 9 rockets. That is more than any other country launches in a year. SpaceX by itself, one company, did more rocket launches than all of Europe, all of China, all of Russia, and everybody else combined. The European rocket company Arianespace, which has been launching rockets since 1980 from a launch pad in French Guiana in South America, struggled to launch even a few times in 2024. Their new rocket, the Ariane 6, only had its very first flight in July 2024. SpaceX launched 134 times that year. Russia's Roscosmos, which used to be the most experienced rocket agency in the world and flew the first human to space in 1961 when Yuri Gagarin orbited Earth on Vostok 1, has been struggling and slowing down for years. India's space agency ISRO, which did something amazing in 2023 when Chandrayaan-3 became the first spacecraft to land near the south pole of the moon, is still launching maybe 6 or 7 times a year. SpaceX launched 134 times, and that is not the ceiling. SpaceX said they are aiming for 170 launches in 2025, 170 rockets. That is one launch every 2 days, basically, while Boeing is still trying to get the Space Launch System to fly more than once. And the reason for all of this, the whole entire reason, comes back to those 7 secrets, making everything themselves in that factory in Hawthorne, California, landing the rocket and using it again, blowing things up on purpose at the test site in McGregor, Texas, keeping decisions close to the engineers, using good enough parts instead of perfect expensive parts, paying for it with their own money from Starlink, and keeping every single person pointed at the same goal, which is Mars. These 7 things together make SpaceX the fastest rocket company that has ever existed. And the craziest part is that SpaceX is not done. Starship is going to make Falcon 9 look small. Starship can carry 150 tons of stuff to low Earth orbit, which is the zone right above the atmosphere. Falcon 9 can carry about 22 tons. Starship is almost 7 times more powerful. And SpaceX wants to reuse Starship completely, both the giant booster called Super Heavy and the spacecraft on top of it, so that eventually a Starship launch might cost somewhere between $2 million and $10 million. A Falcon 9 right now costs $67 million. A traditional rocket from United Launch Alliance, which is the American rocket company that is a joint venture between Boeing and Lockheed Martin and launches rockets like the Atlas V and the Vulcan, charges over $100 million per flight. If Starship gets down to $2 million, space opens up to basically everyone. Universities could afford to send experiments to Mars. Small countries could afford to put their own satellites in orbit. Things that are impossible right now become possible. And all of it traces back to that plane ride home from Moscow in 2001 when Elon Musk pulled out a piece of paper and did the math and realized that the parts for a rocket only cost 3% of what rocket companies were charging. That math changed everything. That math is why there is a Falcon 9 landing on its legs at Cape Canaveral tonight. That math is why Mechazilla caught a rocket out of the sky with robot arms at Starbase in Boca Chica, Texas. That math is why SpaceX is worth $400 billion right now. And that math is why if humans ever do walk on Mars for the first time, there is a very good chance they will get there on a SpaceX rocket, which started with a door slamming in Moscow, which led to a piece of paper on a plane, which led to a factory in Hawthorne, California, which led to a launch pad in Boca Chica, Texas, which is pointed straight at Mars.